Go for it. I just clicked live on YouTube, so we should be good to go right now.
Thank you. I want to welcome everybody to the November 9th meeting of the Wenatchee School Board. And as our first order of business, I would ask that you would join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. And we have a flag coming up somewhere.
Yep, give me a second. It's
okay.
A second to get that particular screen shared. There we go.
Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, first up on our agenda is our consent agenda, on which we have our October 26th regular minutes, board meeting minutes, vouchers and payroll, personnel report, surplus report, and contracts. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll move approval of the consent agenda as written.
Thank you, Michelle. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Julie. Is there any discussion? Okay, this is a roll call vote. Martin?
Aye.
Michelle?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
Maria?
Aye.
And Laura is aye as well. That motion passes. Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda, we have citizen comments, and it's my understanding that there are somewhere between 3 and 5 people who have signed up to speak this evening.
Correct. We have 4, and I'll call them in order. And then if there's, Kim's going to continue to look to make sure we got everybody. But first up tonight is Johnny Houston. So let me bring him over. And after Johnny tonight is Allison, just so you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Houston, there you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So apparently I need to say this now. Sending your child to school is not implied consent. If mandated, are you, the Wenatchee School Board, for or against inoculating our children with the experimental gene therapy as a requirement for attending school? Make this a topic of discussion now. Tell us where you stand. If you are against it, formulate a written plan that states so. Why wait for Inslee to force it upon us? And let's not be naive. It's coming. Parents deserve to know which direction you will take this in advance. You have 2 weeks till the next board meeting. Let it be known. Parents, if this worries you as well, demand to know. Act, send emails, or speak out. Don't be docile. Parents, I also urge you to make plans in advance that will enable you to remove your child from government schools when and if necessary. Talk to parents, talk to retired teachers, find teachers who were forced out of the system, and speak to the churches, even if you don't go to church. Get the ball rolling for community learning outside of government schools. The fewer children in these schools means less funding and less power. Your children are yours. They do not belong to the collective. Do not allow the government to bully you. Your freedom and rights are given to you by God, not the government. San Francisco has now mandated the shot for children. In Australia, there are places where thousands of children are being forced to take the shot without parental consent, in some cases knowledge. Professional athletes in their prime from around the world are dropping dead on the pitch for heart failure. It's becoming a regular thing. For example, 24-year-old Austrian hockey star Boris Sadecki dropped dead on the ice of cardiac arrest. None of these athletes had any heart issues prior to taking the shot. These stories are only becoming more prevalent. So what happens to our children? I'll read a quote from Christine Anderson of the European Parliament. All through Europe, governments have gone through great lengths to get the people vaccinated. We were promised the shots would be a game changer and it would restore our freedom. Turns out that was not true. It does not render you immune. You can still contract the virus and you can still be infectious. The only thing the vaccine did for sure was spill billions and billions of dollars into the pockets of pharmaceutical companies. The majority of MEPs support oppression of the people while claiming shamelessly to do it for the people's own good. For it is not the goal that renders the system oppressive, it is always the methods by which the goal is in pursuit. Whenever a government claims to have the people's interests at heart, you need to think again. In the history of mankind, there has never been a political elite sincerely concerned about the well-being of regular people. What makes us think this is different now? If the age of enlightenment has brought forth anything, then it's certainly this. Never take anything any government tells you at face value. Always question everything a government does or doesn't do. Always look for ulterior motives and ask who benefits. Whenever a political elite pushes an agenda this hard and resorts to extortion and manipulation to get their way, you can almost always be sure the benefit is definitely not what they had at heart. As far as I'm concerned, I will not be vaccinated with anything that has not been properly vetted and tested and has shown no sound scientific evidence that the benefit outweighs the disease itself or the possible long-term side effects, which to this day we know nothing about. I will not be reduced to a mere guinea pig by getting a vaccine with an experimental drug, and most assuredly not get a vaccine because my government tells me to and promises in return I will be granted freedom. Let me be clear, no one grants me freedom, for I am a free person, end quote. Parents, if you think you're alone, you're not. If you think you don't have a choice, you do. Please protect your children. No more tyranny, no more shots.
Thank you, Mr. Houston. Who's next, please?
So Allison Rasmussen, and I just brought her in.
Whenever you're ready, Allison.
All right, can you guys hear me?
Yes, do you have a camera this evening?
Trying to figure out how.
I can see you now.
Oh, yay. Okay. So my name is Allison Rasmussen, and I am a retired Wenatchee School District teacher and former ESD specialist. I have 2 children in the Wenatchee School District. And my comments and questions are in the October 12th, 2021 school board meeting. President Jake stated that discussion had resulted in support from the majority of the board to continue to hold meetings virtually until after November elections. So my question to you is, why is this school board meeting being held online when it was stated at the October 12th school board meeting by President Jakes that after the election, school board meetings would occur in person again? And then I stated in an email to you those exact minutes in that October 12th meeting. Secondly, I strongly recommend that the current and newly elected school board members have time to review. Oh, sorry, skipped. Here we are. Yeah, I strongly recommend that the current newly elected school board members have time to review staff comments, concerns, and questions that were provided to the Wenatchee School District staff survey following the DEI training on October 8th before approving the equity audit proposal. This proposal is costing over $169,000. And if the school board has not seen or reviewed these survey results, then I urge the board to table the equity audit proposal on tonight's agenda. And I ask the question, district staff attended this training. Has the school board been presented with all and not just selected high remarks of the staff survey results following this training? The audit seems extremely costly to implement given current budget constraints and declining student enrollment. It is my opinion that our limited school budget could be spent more wisely on student, staff, and building needs. Question, has the school board looked at the 16 educator and student-focused groups and the positions that are to be held in the equity audit proposal that will need to be created? There's 8 educator-focused groups, so that would be teachers, and that'd be 8 separate groups. Will these educators be paid for their extra time spent assisting this audit? Teachers have been pushed to their limits given staff shortages, increased classroom sizes, added job description duties, and meeting the needs of students missing 10 to 20 days of school due to COVID contamination protocols. And another focus group position that would be added would be 8 student focused groups. When will they do this? During the school day, or will students be pulled from their regular classes or asked to stay after school? Another question, are these positions going to be paid positions on top of the $169,000? Or was this budgeted into the $169,000? It seems to me that many of the questions being answered in the audit, there's an example like in table 1 in the proposal of the audit, the equity audit, could easily be researched and found by a committee or by a school district staff rather than spending this enormous amount of money for an outside source. And that was, I think, chosen. I think the person to do the audit was Education Northwest to complete this audit. Another question, only 2 out of 295 Washington state school districts have paid Education Northwest to complete this type of audit. Has the school district or board received references from the 2 school districts of Evergreen Public Schools and North Shore School District to see whether the audit is worth the money proposed to be spent?
Allison, I'm going to interrupt you because you did have over your 3-minute time limit. We did receive your comments in writing by email, so we do have the full context of all your remarks.
Okay,
Thank you so much.
you're welcome.
Okay, next I understand is Rachel.
Yep, Rachel's next. I'll bring her across.
Great.
Hi there, the 3-minute pressure. Good evening, folks. First, I wanted to thank staff and Superintendent Gordon for the information in the meeting wrap up where the DEI video was published. I think the link was wrong originally, but it did get fixed. So thanks for that. I would really encourage you to post that somewhere static on your website along with the handouts. I haven't received the handouts yet that went along with it. Since you did send that press release out in July, I think it deserves that kind of status. Clearly not everyone attends school board meetings and not everyone reads the minutes. So it'd be great to just have that out there static. So thank you for that. In regard to the agenda tonight, the equity audit proposal, thanks Allison for your comments in that regard. I think there's a lot of good questions. And again, I'm going to focus my comments tonight just really on governance. So here is a lengthy proposal. It's the first time I've seen it. I have no idea if it's the first time you all have seen it. And I am forced to comment based on not hearing you all ask questions and have the dialogue back and forth. So I don't have an opportunity as a constituent to hear that dialogue and then weigh in as a constituent with my board on my thoughts on that or any concerns. So I would encourage you guys to have a robust dialogue tonight, go through that proposal, and then seek feedback from your constituents. And I will note that as dismal as our turnout was for our election, a meager 46%, I will note that it's a 62% increase over the last, the 2017 election. So we have a lot of people interested. So we had at the peak, we had in those races in 17, we had 7,400 people weigh in and vote. And this time we had 12,000. So people are interested. These are your constituents. And I would just really encourage you, again, to take a look at how you conduct business so that we have a real opportunity to get back with you and have real dialogue about this proposal that could obviously is intended to affect our district in the future. And then my final comment would be that my recollection, regardless of what the minutes say from the October 12th meeting, was that there would be a reconsideration after the election of how to conduct meetings. I don't see that on the agenda tonight, and that's a little bit disconcerting as the election is now over. Thank God, right? So I would like you guys to have that discussion as you said you would on October 12th. And that is it, other than Johnny, thank you for your comments on the vaccinations. I would just like to say that I believe in informed consent, and I also believe in parental consent as well for these vaccinations. So I think the medical freedom and the choice of parents is going to be very, very key. And I would love to see the school board support medical freedom for our kiddos that attend our public schools. So thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Next up, I believe we have Brian Higgins. Is that correct?
Hello there.
Hello.
My name is Brian Higgins. I teach at Wenatchee High School and I live on South Mudhouse Street. I just want to talk today really briefly.
You look
A
frozen.
couple of teachers are.
Okay.
Sorry about that. So first off, a shout out to Tanner Dotzauer. Tanner Dotzauer took his sophomore Avid classes to take part in the Dia de Hacer la Diferencia, or the Make a Difference Day, and made a pretty positive impact on our community. So thank you very much, Tanner Dotzauer, for being able to make connections for our students where they can work in our community and be a productive part of our community. It's really important to see that kind of work going on. I just want to give a shout out to Lauren Brown, one of our marketing teachers at the high school, and Jake Buchholz, who supported Lauren Brown in creating a really cool learning opportunity today for his students, where he brought in another teacher to teach some different material it seemed very engaging and exciting for his students, and to be able to do that for students and to make the day just a little bit different every day is what keeps students engaged. So fantastic job, Lauren Brown and Jake Buchholz, for making sure that he had support in that activity. And then finally, I received an email today from one of my freshman Avid students with a kudos for Janiyah Johnson. And they don't send these emails to me because I'm going to say anything at meetings. They send these emails because they're really excited. And what she communicated was that Janiyah Johnson was dealing with a situation in a class and took some really intentional steps to respond to students' needs without getting emotional, and providing a lot of support. And she just wanted to tell me how excited she was to see some of the things that we're learning in our Avid class, to see teachers using that in the workplace with how they interact with students, leaving kids feeling positive and productive and supported. So big shout out to Janiyah Johnson, who is one of our Avid partners and a supporter of our program, but someone who is also trying to live the values that we're trying to instill in students, in their lives, and in our community. So thank you very much to all those teachers, and thank you very much to the board for their work this year.
Thank you, Brian. Appreciate that. Okay, so next up on our agenda is policy updates, first read.
All right, Laura, thank you. And I'll hand it over to Maria and Michelle here in a moment. All three policies that are up tonight, 5253, 4311, and 2195 are all WASDA recommendations with some a few minor adjustments. The first one being 5253. One of the pieces that we altered is in the third to last paragraph on that second page, really dealing with social media accounts. And the first iteration of the policy, it literally said there's no social media use from staff, and staff could not friend. So in consulting with legal counsel, what we did was move the language, soften the language slightly. Students on social media, unless done solely for educational purposes in the context of an authorized formal school relationship and only through an account that is strictly limited to and used for performance of job responsibilities. Any such account must be created and maintained in accordance with district procedures implementing this policy. In today's day and age, there are different ways to engage students, and some of those are through social media. But we really felt like, the committee felt like this was an appropriate way to blend the desire to not from WASDA not to have any social media, any friending or anything like that, to this type of policy that is educationally based. It is a WSD policy, social media account. That way we're able to track those aspects, making sure that our students or our staff are both put in a really good place to do the things that they're doing. Maria, Michelle, anything on that one?
Paul, if you could just kind of give an example of where that might be appropriate versus not appropriate. I think that clarification could be helpful.
I'll just use my own. The superintendent has a Twitter account. And I'll give you an example of how Wenatchee High School has a Twitter account run by students, and they will like some of my, I'll take a picture at an event and students will like it, or they'll take a picture or they'll put something out on a social media and I would like it. So based off the original WASDA policy, I could not like that social media posting. So it just was very restrictive. And again, my role as educational, making sure that it's done appropriate through a WSD account, maintained and done appropriately. Thank you, Michelle, though. That's a
Well, and on the flip side of that, with liking or friending or following, so students could follow you on Twitter, but you wouldn't be following them, correct?
so yeah. So
Right.
you have those different aspects that allow you to do the work. But ultimately, we still want our educators to engage with our students. And we recognize late into the 21st century, there are different ways of doing that than email. And our students use Instagram, Facebook, many other things that I have no clue about. But we recognize those pieces are out there. So we felt like this was a very appropriate way. So did legal counsel. Felt like this was a very appropriate step forward with this policy. Maria, anything? Are you good?
We're good.
Okay.
Yep.
The next two, the resource officer piece went through some changes due to House Bill 1214, really including the training, expanding the role of the SRO to include building positive relationships with students and defining a new category of safety and security. So this one really just followed along with that House bill and needing to make those appropriate changes. The same with 2195, that academic acceleration. Needed to make sure that we had that in place for our students as well. Maria, Michelle, anything on those two?
Yeah, I think the addition to the academic acceleration policy, which was added by our district staff, correct, was the prior to the automatic enrollment of the state assessments that we would be looking at our iReady data and other classroom data to ensure that students were ready and that they have the resources to support for their acceleration in learning. So, because
Board?
that wasn't part of WASDA, correct? Right.
I have a housekeeping question on 4311. Are we in sync and up to date with our SRO contract with the revised policy? Okay.
Yes, Danielle has reviewed all of those in line with these new policies. Good question. So if there are no other questions or concerns, we will move those to second read.
And then that means that they will be on the consent agenda at the next meeting unless there are some changes between now and then. Okay, great. Next on our agenda, we have a fiscal year-end presentation.
And Jeanette will be joining us, and Zoom sharing your screen, Jeanette.
Yes, let me get that started here. And then share my screen. Here we go.
It's all yours.
Okay. I'm going to apologize in advance. There's a lot of information in these slides, so we will be taking breaks for questions as we go. Just let me know if you guys have any questions as we go. We're going to be reviewing basically the impacts of last year's finances. So We're actually going to kind of work backwards. Normally we start with the general fund and end with transportation. We're going to start with, I believe, transportation and then work our way to the general fund, because the general fund is beefy and it'll take us a little bit. So I wanted to hold you to the end. So we will start real quick, maybe. Here we go. Okay, so the other funds. So I did kind of a multi-year snapshot here for you guys. Some of it on the left or on the right is mostly just kind of reminder of what we just approved over the summer with the budget. So those are those 4 columns. Won't really touch on those. We'll be mostly focusing on the 2021 actual. Bottom line in transportation vehicle fund is the actual fund balance came in about $50,000 higher than the projected. That projected is what I projected during budget. So definitely good news there. ASB is complicated and it's a tough one to kind of project, especially I think during this pandemic time, with, you know, things happening, things not happening, definitely not our normal at all. So bottom line, ASB, their fund balance dropped about $30,000 overall from the start of the year to the end of the year. You know, there's a lot of factors that go into that. Here on the next slide, I have it, you know, a multi-year history for you guys that kind of shows towards the top, you know, over time, what has that fund balance done? And as you guys can see in 1920, the fund balance did go up quite a bit. Again, that was the year that school was closed, sports got shut down, all of the craziness happened. So a lot of the things that were planned didn't end up actually happening. So that resulted in a higher fund balance. And then this year, we've decreased by almost 5% in fund balance. Down underneath is a snapshot of each building. ASB is very tracked kind of basically in buckets, right? So if a club raises $1, that dollar goes into that club's account and that's where it stays until it's moved or spent. Any questions on ASB?
I just had a question, Jeanette. I noticed that between the 16-17 and the 17-18 school year, there were kind of some significant reductions in some of the middle schools. Not one of them did not have a reduction, but I'm curious why Orchard and Pioneer went down so significantly those years.
Mm-hmm. I would have to look into that off the top of my head. And I don't recall which building, but I know one of the middle schools used to do a big fundraiser. And it was about that time that they decided to stop doing that fundraiser. And so that that very well might have been that year. I can look into that further and kind of try to narrow in, you know, where exactly that reduction happened.
That's okay. I just thought it was kind of curious. So I didn't know if there was a redistribution between the middle schools and the high school, or if it was just individual buildings based on enrollment and other things. I didn't know if it if some of this was enrollment driven or not tied in necessarily to fundraising, but some other elements. So
yeah, ASB is somewhat impacted by enrollment because most all the buildings have ASB cards that they give to students in exchange for the ASB card fee. so that students can attend like other events and things like that. So it is somewhat enrollment driven. The money will, I mean, I guess a school could choose to transfer money to another school, but that probably won't happen. So all the money is contained within the school. Oftentimes, potentially, we'll see transfers, between general ASB and clubs and things like that. But typically, that money's I've never seen it transfer from one school to another. ASB is very much fundraiser driven. So you have, some schools who are more willing to do fundraisers and, they don't mind kind of the extra paperwork and things like that. So they will do that. They see the positive side of the fundraising compliance piece, and they're able to, spend that money to do, either to do a class trip or whatever they're kind of working on. So not hugely enrollment driven, definitely doesn't transfer between schools or anything like that. That would be a new one for me.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that.
Well, while we're at a pause, going back to the last slide regarding the transportation, I know we're focusing on the actuals, but I was curious to see that your projections for 2023 and 4 were quite a bit off given our actuals. With 2021 being, or 19 being 500,000. I mean, can you explain where we're getting the 215, 218, 220 when we're at 500, 300?
So the 500 is in 1920. That is that high because the district transferred $250,000 from the general fund. And we did not choose to do that in any of the 4 years for the budget that we just passed. That's why that's lower. Also, our Department of Ecology grant ran out. So this 2021 year was the last year of that grant. And so I did not budget that going forward because we don't have it.
Okay.
So we potentially might have to look at transferring money into capital projects in the future. At this point, I am not planning on that, but we will definitely look at trends in our fleet depreciation and our fleet health and factor that in when needed.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that's what was the concern, is if we've needed about 500 or more, how does that look in those few years? But that makes sense.
Yeah, it's kind of a game with transportation vehicle because, you have to spend money to get the money down the road, but you need the money up front to be able to spend it. So it really is a management piece of, making sure that you're continually purchasing buses so that you're continually getting that depreciation money back from the state. But really, that 1920 year, and I believe a couple of years prior to that, with the transfers from the general fund and that Department of Ecology grant, that really, helped kind of set us up to be able to, hopefully for a few years, get by without transferring money.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to the debt service fund. So this fund basically, or not basically, but this fund pays for our voted debt. So our bonds that are outstanding. Sorry. Basically tax collections coming in, some interest earnings, and then on the expenditure side, that bond principal and interest payment, and then a small bond transfer fee as well. So that's kind of the summary of that fund. We ended at about 2.86 million to carry us into the next year. And just a quick snapshot. So our 2010 issue actually will be paid off here next month. Yay. And so after next month, we will only have the 2014 bond issue that we will be paying on. Capital projects, I decided to keep it a little shorter and sweeter because, you know, previous to 2021, the bond projects were wrapping up and there was a bit more activity. Capital projects, unless you have like a sustained long project, is kind of difficult to compare year to year. Even looking here at the 2021 actual and then next year's budget, you can see they look very, very different. So each year is very individual. So looking at long periods of time typically isn't helpful. So as you guys can see, for 2021, the majority of the funds actually came from network projects. Sorry. Network projects that we were able to use our some of our CARES funds for as well. Really network expansion that's supporting all of our one-to-one devices, really beefing up our network so that we can handle that heavy load of devices on our campuses. So that's where the majority of the revenue came from. On the expense side, we had quite a bit of building security projects. We had some alarms, fire alarms in the high school portables, Sunny Slope portable that went in. That's also going to be expensed in the new year. And then some preliminary work on the softball fields, that basically the feasibility aspect of that. So at the end of the August 31st of 2021, we had almost $2.5 million left in that fund, which is about a $500,000 decrease. Any questions on capital projects before we jump into general fund? Okay. Here we go. Just some highlights, basically reminders at this point from last year. Our enrollment was down quite a bit, 366 FTE. It's definitely quite a bit. Due to that, we made budget reductions mid-year to help us financially be able to sustain that large of an enrollment drop. We knew that we could not just continue as normal with that large of a decrease. Athletics also, due to the pandemic, operated with shortened seasons. So that impacted costs as well. We were in remote learning until November. So a lot of our costs that we would normally incur were not happening. You know, we had some staff laid off for a while, those kinds of things. Also, we had the one-time COVID funding. So that's included in here as well. This is a summary of the revenue. So the blue bar is the budget, and then the red bar is the actual. So you'll see the two longest bars, those are state general purpose. So that is our apportionment funds, and that's the enrollment. So the difference between the actual and the budget is really that 366 student decrease. And about $3 million is what I was planning for in my head when we were looking at those budget reductions we made mid-year. I also included some other items on the side there. The federal general, that's our FEMA funds. So that's where that is. The federal special, that includes a lot of things, but a couple of items that are kind of different. Our food services revenue actually came in about $400,000 higher than kind of normal, basically. That's probably a lot due to the way we were able to claim meals and the reimbursement rate we got. Also, that CARES funding, it's about $5 million, a little over. So that's another reason why that actual budget or actual bar is higher than the budget. Any questions on the revenue? Okay. So the expenses. So kind of a slightly different approach here. On the left-hand side, I kind of wanted to explain what is included in each of the little or each of the big buckets, and what types of or what cost centers basically are in those. So the bars at the bottom, which is the support services. So that has transportation, nutrition, it's called district-wide support. So it's basically kind of, I think of like the backbone of the district, tech, warehouse, the motor pool, our insurance cost for property, district, typical district office staff, that kind of thing. The school board, that's where your guys' budget goes. So as you guys can see, that was about $1 million or $2 million lower than the budget. When you just consider we were in remote learning for 2 months, we unfortunately had to lay off some staff for almost that whole amount of time. It makes sense when you look at the two bars. Also, the community support item, that's the child care piece. That piece was actually paid for from the CARES budget because that $29,000 actual was the first responder childcare that we were required to do when COVID first hit. Then the other instructional programs, that's kind of a big random mishmash group. 21st century match, billable expenses, which are basically, if we pay for something, but we're going to be reimbursed by something other than a grant, that's where we put it. FEMA, the first round of CARES was coded there. AVID, those kinds of programs. Then compensatory instruction is a lot of the programs that you guys are typically used to hearing about, right? The LAP, high poverty, bilingual, migrant, title, all the titles, 21st century, the juvenile detention center, all of those types of programs. And then federal stimulus is new. That's where pretty much all the rest of the CARES grants are going to live. For the most part is in that federal stimulus category. And then regular instruction is everything else. Okay, so fund balance, which is mostly what people just want to skip to. So something that's relatively new that I kind of wanted to walk you guys through is there's now kind of two different buckets within the general fund. There is the general fund, which is basically all of our state and federal programs. And then there is what's called the local sub-fund. So that's where any of our local funds are directed. So our local tax collections, if we collect any fines and fees from students and families, those go in there. There's some other little programs that also fall in there. If we receive any donations, that kind of stuff goes in there. So anything that's considered, locally received goes into the local sub-fund. That's actually a state mandate that came through 1920 was the first year that was implemented. So I wanted to separate that out for you guys because on the year-end F-196 report, it is separated. And I think as time goes on, it will become more and more separated on reports and kind of pulled out. So the general fund is one fund. When I report to you guys every month, basically you're getting the snapshot of that total column because our reporting doesn't have it broken out into the two on that same report. Let's see here. So basically, bottom line, our total general fund balance ended at about 12.9%. Again, that's a factor of the expenses for the year. We did end up with a couple minor adjustments. We'll skip to the next slide here. So basically what this slide is looking at what I was projecting as far as fund balance, ending fund balance over the summer as part of the budget process, and then what our fund balance actually was. Just making sure that we're aligned and that there's not any like crazy surprises or odd things that came through. The first item on the list is restricted revenue for carryover. So basically we ended up with less grant carryover, which is fine. We can spend it in the current year or we can carry it over. So we just chose to spend a little bit more in the current year. Restricted for Skill Center. So that's the Wenatchee Valley Tech Center. And all of their funds are tracked separately and they all of those are there. So basically one of the things that happened was during the legislative session, they passed some learning recovery funds for them. But at the time of the budget, there was nothing out there as far as how much we were getting, when we were getting it, anything like that. So those funds actually ended up coming in August, and then we will just be carrying those over into the future to support the tech center. Also, our donation account came in a little bit less, just finalizing some of those. Ended up being less anticipated carryover, which again is fine. Either spend it in the current year or spend it in the next year. Kind of some of the bigger things that came through is the expenses ended up actually right on projections. So I felt pretty good about that. And revenues came in higher than projected. So the resulting increase in fund balance was mostly due to revenues being higher than I anticipated. So some changes were towards the end of the year, our enrollment did increase slightly. Our bilingual funds, we actually received a little bit more towards the end. And then the CARES funds as well. Those were, at the time of the budget, there wasn't necessarily final plans in place. And so, adapting as we go, that was just one of the things that happened. Also, some unanticipated and unknown items came through. We've had some insurance claims and reimbursements, so we got those finalized. So we were able to count on those. We also got an audio system grant. And so those funds came in. We were approved for some safety net funding for special education. We apply every year. Typically, when we do the budget, we don't know exactly how much that's going to be, so we don't count on that. Transportation also received some hold harmless funding. And again, we didn't know how much that was going to be. Nutrition services, the meal claims were higher, and they also received some additional funding. I believe it was passed through from the feds to use up some of their extra allocation. And then we received some additional Medicaid match as well. So bottom line, I was anticipating we would end the year last year with about a 10% fund balance. We actually ended at about, like I said, about 12.9. So I'm hopeful that that will help us, carrying forward into this next year, looking at the budget shortfalls that we were kind of just seeing this year and then into the future. Any questions on those two very wordy, lots of number slides?
Jeanette, what is transportation hold harmless?
So basically what the state did this last year, the legislature, is they basically held harmless districts for not having students on buses at the beginning of the school year. That's basically what it boiled down to, because we started students back up going to school in November. There were districts that I don't even think started this school or students back to school at all last year. So the legislature decided to essentially fully fund or provide what they had committed to initially in the budget.
Okay, I got it. Hold harmless normally is an insurance thing.
It applies to money too.
Yeah, but I do remember what it was now. Thank you.
Okay, we'll roll right along. So you guys probably wonder, well, now that that's done, what are you going to do, Jeanette? You must be bored. So kind of rolling through what the next few steps look like. As you guys know, we've settled numerous collective bargaining agreements. We're still working through some of those, but looking at what are the cost impacts of those, putting those to, putting basically those through the process and making sure all of our salaries are updated and everything like that. Also updating projected revenue based on our, increased enrollment and hopefully continued increased enrollment. Continuously reviewing our spending plans, what we're thinking for this year, what hiccups have we found so far, those kinds of things, working through that. We're also going to be working on a more transparent budget process and web page. And so we'll be working through that process. Also, I will be presenting kind of a mid-year financial update to the board. I don't have a final date on that. I'm thinking probably January, February. I think just after all of this pandemic crazy, our collective bargaining agreements, a lot of them changing, our enrollment being what it was and is, I think that it would be good just to kind of take a look at that, especially before budget season rolls up upon us again. Again, we talked about last summer, the staffing model. So working on developing and implementing that for next school year. And starting budget all over again. So that's kind of the road ahead.
I see you left off all the fun auditing you're going to have to do with the CARES funds.
I try to ignore it.
You don't have that much free time.
I know. Thankfully, I have an awesome, awesome director of accounting, Karen, who handles the auditors very well.
Board, any other questions for Jeanette?
Awesome.
Jeanette, thanks for sharing kind of the differences between what you budgeted and what was the actual, especially kind of where those different pots of money change. So that's a really great perspective to have for the board. And, you know, it's good that I'm thankful that you really did some really thoughtful projections that put us in a better position, you know, kind of imagining worst case scenario, but of course that worst case scenario didn't happen with our budget. So I appreciate your forethought in planning such a budget. So thank you.
Great.
All right, Jeanette, thank you so much.
Yes, thank
Great
you.
job.
Okay, moving along. Next item in the agenda. Next section is our action section. And first up, we have the highly capable program plan.
And tonight we have Kathy Moody with us to present to the board a brief outline of the program and what's in part of this action tonight. Kathy.
All right. Well, good evening, everybody. I appreciate this opportunity to share a little bit about highly capable programs in the Wenatchee School District. And you received a copy of the iGrant Form Package 217, which is our highly capable program plan. And this form package, sorry, I'm trying to get my screen up at the same time I'm trying to talk, and sometimes that's tricky. This form package requires school board approval in order for us to receive state funds. So the budgetary impact, the budget for high cap programs is $527,453. And the state funding formula is 5% of our student population, which covers about 39% of the high cap budget. The rest of the funds come from BEA levy and local dollars. And just laying the groundwork, the mission of highly capable programs is to provide services that acknowledge and address students' diverse advanced learning needs. In the Wenatchee School District, the multi-tiered system of support model, or MTSS, is a framework for providing services for all students, which does include those with advanced learning needs. There are national standards for highly capable programming developed by the National Association for Gifted Children. And these are the guiding principles that guide our work. Giftedness is dynamic and constantly developing, and it's found among students from all backgrounds. Educators should be focusing on positive student outcomes, and all educators are involved so that students' needs are met throughout the day. In the Wenatchee School District, there are currently 740 students, grades K-12, identified as needing program services. And over the course of the year, we have ongoing identification activity. We expect that number to grow to about 850 students. So I'd like to share briefly about the identification process and range of services provided to students with advanced learning needs. But before we move into this process, I do want to note, as it's stated in the form package, one of the directives from the state is that district practices for identifying the most highly capable students must prioritize equitable identification of low-income students. And so ideally, the identification of highly capable students should roughly match the overall demographics of our student population, because students needing highly capable services exist in every segment of the population. There are some complications and nuances to that, though, based on definitions and the way data is collected. And so I just wanted to share one example. For example, English language learners in Washington State. The definition includes a component that says an eligible student for purposes of the transitional bilingual program is a student whose primary language is other than English and whose English skills are sufficiently deficient or absent to impair learning. And the federal definition is different but similar. And so when we're trying to match our demographics to demographics of the district, what we find is that typically students with a native language other than English who are identified for HiCap services, especially for reading or language arts, do not have difficulty in speaking, reading, writing, or understanding the English language. And they typically exit from the transitional bilingual program early, usually quite early. And so while they continue to be students who have a native language other than English, after a period of time, they're no longer counted as transitional bilingual students. And so the number of students who have exited from the transitional bilingual programs who are being served in HiCap programs is not information that's collected by the state. So we've been exploring some ways to try to capture this data of former EL students, because I think that number is going to be quite a bit higher than current EL students. So that's one of the ways that the data that we compare ourselves to is a little more nuanced. Equitable identification is being addressed in multiple ways to meet this state imperative. All students are automatically considered for identification every year. So in essence, all students are considered automatically referred for possible HiCap services. Testing and screening occurs during the school day at the student's home school. And that is in there because in some districts it's, you know, Saturday testing at some distant location, right? Communication about the identification process is available in English and Spanish. And we are reaching out to families in their native language, seeking to share information through attendance at district events like the Migrant Bilingual PAC event and the Migrant Bilingual and Avid Information Night recently at the high school. In data that we review for identification, we do look at language acquisition scores. So ELPA testing and upcoming soon to be WEDA testing would be considered for rapid language acquisition. And then just in general, we use criteria guidelines rather than cut scores for identification. We consider multi-year or multiple measures of data, so there's more than one pathway for identification. We also do universal screening in the district using the cognitive abilities test. It's shifted to second grade and is now online, which gives us the opportunity to test students when it's not timed. It can still capture their reasoning ability and problem solving skills, but it uses pictures. And this online COGAT screening also gives us a chance to offer different languages for providing directions to students. So languages are available. They can listen to instructions in English, Spanish, and I think there's 6 other languages at the moment. We do consider nonverbal testing as well, and we use local norms whenever possible. so that we're comparing students to other similar Wenatchee students. Throughout the year this year, there will be working groups meeting around the identification process at the middle school level, the high school level, and elementary level to evaluate the structure and process and to seek additional ways to remove any barriers for more representative identification. And part of this process will be to include efforts to utilize SLED rating scales, which is culturally, linguistically, and economically diverse. And those scales expand on the characteristics traditionally used in identifying students for HICAP services. So the identification process, as on the screen, there's annual notification each fall provided in English and Spanish to all households. We send out a mailing as well as publishing online, communicating to families that all students are considered for services, and sharing the identification timelines. Referrals, again, we consider all students automatically referred, but we also accept referrals from teachers, parents, students can self-refer, community members can refer, and that just gives us additional information that we consider in the identification process. If there is going to be any additional assessment or screening done of an individual student, we would get permission to assess. We conduct the screening and assessment, and then the multidisciplinary selection committee meets, following the criteria designated by the state, determines students most in need of highly capable services based on multiple objective criteria. Once students are identified as needing services, a notification letter is sent to parents and guardians, providing them with information about services, and then they would need to return a letter of understanding in order for us to serve their students. And so the services that are provided.
Effie, can I interrupt you just for a quick second? So back on your last slide, part of the screening process that begins at 3rd grade, correct?
It is K-12.
Oh, K-12, sorry. So how is that? Are all the screenings paper and pencil tests? Are there some online tests? I guess I'm wondering how we're serving all our population, because I don't know how it changed last year with a lot of students being online, but with WIA, I assume you're testing there as well.
We do a little bit different testing at WIA, but yes, we do offer the opportunity to test. In our experience and from talking with people around the state, testing remotely does not yield as accurate of results as having students in front of you testing, even if it's online in front of you. So for example, with WIA, we communicated out to parents for the universal screening portion. If you were asking about universal screening, or were you asking about screening in general?
Well, I'm just wondering, if we're looking at K-12, but we know that we have some students who have chosen to do a remote learning option. Right. Again, kind of looking at that equitable piece, how are we reaching out? Because all our other students are back in person full time. How are we reaching out to those WIA students? Because we know for those kids, obviously online is a better model. That's why they're choosing it. But how are we engaging and testing them if we know that online testing is not optimal?
Well, I would say the COGAT is difficult to administer online.
Okay.
But we universally screen students. They're taking the iReady exams. We use that universally for all students K-8. For the COGAT testing, though, we provided an opportunity for them to I met them at WIA at a certain time, and we would conduct testing there. So they do have that opportunity.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right, so let's go in the wrong direction. Okay, so services can be provided in 4 different ways. Just universally, students are provided services in the regular classroom, again, K-12, through differentiation, flexible grouping, content acceleration. They might be working on independent projects. And then another way services can be provided would be in the elementary. We do have a uniquely highly capable program, which is a once a week, very brief pull-out services provided by a high cap specialist. And we do identify students based on strength area, and the services typically are focused on strength areas. And then through acceleration of curriculum or instruction, that can happen anywhere. K-12, curriculum compacting, advanced coursework, at the secondary level, access to college level coursework, and then programs outside the traditional school day or school setting. It can be outside the traditional school day as well. So there might be after school, math is cool, competition groups, and some of this obviously has been impacted in the last couple years. So those things have been happening to more or less degrees than they have in the past, or through mentorships, like directed study. Additionally, one of my roles is as the the AP coordinator for the district and supporting directed study students at the high school. So there are a variety of directed study students, currently 28, with projects with topics in social studies, preparing independently for AP exams, advanced piano studies, studio arts, and advanced placement. Not surprisingly, the number of students taking AP exams was lower last year than the previous year. There were 139 exams taken, and the percentage of students receiving scores of 3 or higher did continue to climb. So it's now at 72%. And this year, again, we expect to have about 110 AP exams in the spring. Students, well, not students, but exams taken by students. That's where we're at so far. And then while form package 217 addresses highly capable program plans, additional district plans exist for a continuous evaluation cycle. And all of the items that we focus on are happening each year, but last year we developed an evaluation plan to really focus or concentrate on making adjustments to one programming component at a time. So this year we're focusing on identification K-12 and have working groups so that we can best use our district resources to maximum effect. And then next year, focusing on services for students, and then the following year on professional development. Again, all of those things are happening every year, but just continuing to review and improve our process and outcomes for students. So our challenge is to continually provide appropriate learning opportunities for our students and to continually grow capacity in our staff to address student needs. So do you have any questions for me?
No,
I do
but
have a couple of questions. Oh, go,
Yeah.
Laura.
go for it.
Oh, I'll go first. In the details section, Kathy, just for my information, since I don't know very much, in the testing systems we use the Wechsler WISC 4. I also see there's a 5 that's used. Could you compare and contrast what the two testing regimes are?
Those are tests that are administered by a psychologist, and I guess we use both.
Okay.
Have in the past year. We're transitioning to the more updated Wechsler 5, but we had purchased Wechsler 4. So the 5 is more robust and it's more current. And that's really used in very limited situations because it's individually administered. It's used in the case where a student might be requesting to whole grade accelerate, or it can be used kind of in the final stages of determining whether a student is eligible for early entrance to kindergarten.
Okay, no, that's great. Then my other detail question, you have a nice table of how many students are served in each grade. When we get to the middle and the high school, where instead of everybody being the same school, we've got CTE, alternative school, and mainstream, are there any differences in the proportions? I mean, we seem to build up to close to 20% from a lower percent in the lower grades. But then what is the meaning of the percent participation by those three categories of education in the upper levels?
Are you talking about the chart with just the numbers?
You've just got the numbers, and then me being a mathematician looked at the percentages by grade compared to the enrollment, and I don't know how to interpret grades, middle school and high school, given the changes in where they're educated.
What page are you referring to, Martin?
It's page 19 or 21.
Okay.
So what I would say, sometimes the numbers just vary based on different cohorts of students.
Yeah. Well, for example, in grade 12, there are 80 students.
Yes.
Are they across all of our institutions?
Yes, we do. I mean, obviously not in equal number, but we do have students at the Internet Academy. We do have students at Westside High School. We do have students.
Do you classify some skill center students in that way and serve them?
I believe that the skill center students show up on the Wenatchee High School rosters.
Okay.
So they would be included, yes.
Yeah.
If they're identified for high cap services, yeah.
Right. So you're able to cover all the full spectrum, and the participation. You don't. And my other question is, you don't have challenges in differential participation between different pathways of education. Like you have more, let's say, more participation in traditional school than in other forms of schooling, or are they all have fairly similar opportunities and application?
You know, I don't know the answer to that question. It's an interesting one. I know that students are everywhere, but in terms of the percentages based on the numbers of students, for example, at West Side, if it's proportional, but I can find that out.
I think my main interest would be to understand what the best thing to do is, and I was just curious to get some information.
Okay. Am I understanding that you're asking if it's relative?
No, I don't need statistics. I'm just saying we should be looking at it as a district. What's the right thing to be doing? Don't go get extra statistics at this point.
Okay.
But if the question means better statistics is better management of the program in the future, yes.
Okay.
Sort of dovetailing on Martin's question about statistics, are these projection numbers lower than we would potentially see because we're coming out of COVID? how is enrollment expected to be impacted because of basically a year out of school in some cases?
This is a projection, those numbers, and it's probably pretty similar to pre-COVID. I think that it's 5 less than we were projecting for the end of year last year. So yeah, it has obviously impacted everyone, but in terms of numbers identified for services, no. In terms of what the services might look like, that may be more impacted.
And there's no change. This is a program that this is the same format of program that we've had going on. This is essentially a continuation of what we've got. Is that correct?
Yes, although I would say sometimes people think that the pullout model is the only way services are provided. And so services are provided in 3 other ways too. So yes, all are continuing.
Okay.
So Kathy, I'm wondering how your staff numbers have been affected, because I know you always have some shifting of folks into the regular classroom and some people moving into high cap as far as your teaching staff. So I'm wondering, with our enrollment numbers changing over the last couple of years and different building needs and the creation of WIA, just kind of everything. What does your staffing look like right now compared to maybe 2 years ago? And, and how are we as a district kind of meeting, are we staffed where we need to be for high cap right now to kind of meet those high cap student needs, or are we a little understaffed? Help me understand where we are.
Okay, well, the only staff explicitly designated, that come out of this budget would be the 4 elementary high cap specialists, and that continues to stay the same. Again, as the education of all students is the responsibility of all educators, general education classroom teachers, K-12, are part of the high cap staffing, if you will, because they are working with those students daily.
So the staffing needs are met, I guess, is what you're telling me, or not?
Well, I think there's always room to grow. I think there's opportunities for professional development, but I do think that we are making some great strides with multi-tiered systems of support of differentiating for students and addressing students' needs by scholar by skill. So yeah, it's the same as it has been. So in terms of staffing numbers.
And if we have parents out there whose students are interested, like you said, students can be kind of self-referred, I guess. Who should they reach out to? Is there a general high cap number? If their building doesn't have an assigned person, what would be the best way for a parent to reach out?
So they could talk to someone at their building if that's where they're most comfortable. They could also reach out to me at the district office. There is a high cap number. There's a high cap email. So
would you mind just sharing that just so anybody watching?
Okay.
Put her on the spot.
Sorry, it's kind of your time to market yourself. So
okay.
I just want you to be able to share that if you have that information.
So the phone number is 509-663-8161, extension 33316 would get you to Nylea. Since I'm part-time in this role, she can get a message to me. The email would be highcap@wenatcheeschools.org.
Thank you.
I don't have any questions, but I do have to say that, we had this presentation about a year ago, and I've seen the recruitment efforts and the information being presented in Spanish and English, more of it. It's been nice seeing Kathy there as well as Nylea there, who speaks Spanish at Avid Nights, Migrant Lingo Pack. So kudos for that, taking that initiative to really put yourself out there and be able to present the information both in Spanish and English. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
I don't have any questions either, but I do want to thank you for the thorough presentation that you've delivered. That was a lot of work in compiling and all that and putting into presentation form. So thank you very much for coming to the meeting tonight with that information.
All right.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then an action item though too, so.
Yeah, it is an action item. So after all that, is there a motion to approve, scrolling back to the beginning, is it the application for the grant? Is that what our motion?
Approve the data and information in Form FP 217, is that right? Okay, I would propose that motion.
I will second that.
Is there any discussion? Okay, this is a roll call vote. Maria?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
Michelle?
Aye.
Martin?
Aye.
Laura is aye as well. That motion passes. Thank you. Okay, now we move on to our Wenatchee collective bargaining agreement.
All right, thank you, Laura. So the Wenatchee Educators Association and the district have come to an agreement. I'll highlight two of the biggest areas. It's a 2-year contract starting September 1st, 2021 and ending August 31st, 2023. Their salary schedule increases of 2% for 21-22 and 2% or IPD, whichever is higher. But I sincerely want to thank all the members on the negotiation team, from both the administration and our Educators Association for coming to the table and working together to come up with this agreement. And I also want to thank the board for their work through these negotiation processes. So board, Laura, back to you.
Thank you. So this is also an action item on our agenda this evening. If the board is ready to make a motion, I will entertain one.
I'll move approval of the Wenatchee Education Association collective bargaining agreement.
Thank you, Michelle. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Julie. Any discussion? Just want to thank the team for focusing on the work and getting it done with minimal conflict, at least none that I heard about. So that's good work on part of the team. Okay, so if you are in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye on the roll call. Martin?
Aye.
Michelle?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
Maria?
Aye.
And Laura is aye. That motion passes. Okay, now we move on to the rather large item in our packet this evening, the equity audit proposal. Paul, could you give us some?
Yeah, thank you, Laura.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. So tonight, the board has in front of that the equity audit from Education Northwest. So why an equity audit for the Wenatchee School District? Short answer is to support the improvement of student outcomes. You heard from Kathy just a few moments ago. It's about supporting all of our students to ensure that each student has opportunities and access to all of our programming throughout our school district. First, it's also a key component of our strategic plan. Equity is one of the board's 3 values: equity, educational excellence, and accountability. I would also say that equity is a part of educational excellence and accountability. You find that equity when we're doing right by our students and supporting our students for what they need when they need it. You heard Kathy earlier, or just a few moments ago, talk about skill by scholar. Skill by scholar is really working exactly what the board asked us to do, the previous board and this current board, to really working with each individual student. And by skill by scholar, it really is looking at where are those skills that I may have a deficit in, and what are those skills that I may have great strength, and how do I continue to work with our students to expand them wherever they're at. Accountability is to our students that we are delivering on an equitable and an excellent educational outcome for each of our students. Equity is central to our promise statement. We promise to build a foundation of diversity, equity, inclusion from which each student emerges future ready. Equity is about ensuring that each of our students have what they need to be future ready. Equity creates belonging. Equity creates access. Equity is about opportunities. Equity is doing what is right and not what is always easy for our kids. The equity audit that is before the board tonight is an opportunity for our district to engage a third-party expert to conduct a review or do a deep dive into our schools, into our curriculums, and some other areas. The curriculums, the policies, the materials, and the resources, the discipline policies and procedures and practices, our instructional policies and teaching practices, hiring and recruiting policy and practices, access to grade level instruction, and access to advanced and honor level instruction. So really looking at the core of what we do instructionally for our students is what is at the core of this equity audit. How will they do this work? They'll do it through the collection of curriculum and documentation review. They'll do district-wide teacher surveys, focus group with teachers, district-wide survey with families and students, focus groups with students, interview with administrators to really get a deep understanding of where we are at in our school district and how are we serving each and every one of our students throughout our district. The equity audit will culminate in a final report that summarizes the findings, which will be reported to the board. It will also be reported in both English and Spanish, the full report. The report will recommend targeted, culturally responsive strategies grounded in research-based practices that leaders can use to establish and sustain a district-wide culture of equity and inclusion. Specifically, the findings from the audit are meant to identify areas of opportunities, inform short and medium and long range actions that the district can take to advance equity, and illuminate other areas for further investigation. The report will identify systemic patterns of racial or ethnic proportionality of teachers, for classified staff members, for administrators, an analysis of the extent to which these groups reflect the district's student population. And then also, probably more importantly, how do we help transition that work from the hiring practices to really reflecting our community, our student population, because we know right now where our staff population is. We know that. But the key is, what are those steps we need to take? What's the research? What's been proven in practice to actually change that? So all of this work will be done to make sure that we're able to really have a shared understanding of our strengths, our opportunity gaps, and areas for improvement across the entire district, including our educators, our families, our community stakeholders, and students. This will be an incredibly important aspect of where we're going and what we're doing. I'm also pleased with the 2 co-leads that they're assigning, that they would assign to the Wenatchee School District. The 2 leads have an incredible background of experiences working in nonprofit, working in school districts, working at almost every level within the equity, diversity, inclusion field. Their backgrounds, I believe, are incredibly impressive. PhD, both are PhD leads. Both have been in this work for a number of years. Both have really unique backgrounds that, quite honestly, I think help us understand where we're at and where we're going. The groups that they've worked with: Evergreen Public Schools in Washington, Lower Merion School District in Pennsylvania, North Shore School District in Washington, U.S. Department of Education, U.S. Department of Justice, the Oregon Department of Education, Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. So there's a lot there within the plan itself. But how did we get here? How did we get to this point? The board remembers last spring, way back when, in that March timeline, I brought forward a concept based off of our emerging strategic plan and our values, and a concept brought forward to bring forward an equity audit, along with hiring a director of equity. Through those conversations and others, it was clear a few board members supported doing both the equity audit and hiring of the director of equity, and other board members supported starting with the equity audit first to discover the different needs of our school district. However, all the board members supported the idea of the equity review. We paused on the hiring of the director of equity, and we've moved forward with the audit. The equity audit is also a critical aspect of our strategic plan. In each of the 5 different iterations of the plan that the board has seen since June, there was always an equity audit in the plan. Within our priority of thriving environments, welcoming spaces where all individuals flourish, are seen and valued, feel safe, and know they belong. There's the heading of working to hire staff that reflect our community. Also within that same one, develop facilities and operations that reinforce the equitable learning opportunities. Within our priority of opportunities, which is equitable access to high quality academic, extracurricular, and real world experiences, we literally have a heading that says build the skills and knowledge of our staff in diversity, equity, and inclusion. It says conduct a district-wide evaluation of current practices, implement a DEI plan district-wide based on the evaluation. Under remove systemic barriers and obstacles for each student, the plan says the district it's completed an equity evaluation and has implemented an equity action plan. At the conclusion of the equity evaluation, the district will create a community-wide equity group to support the implementation of the equity action plan. The work is important work for each of our students. As the boards recognize, this board and the prior board recognized how important equity is for our kids, that we're delivering what each student needs, or said differently, like from Kathy Moody, by skill, by scholar, by doing right by our students, by taking a hard look at the work we've been doing and owning our data. We've been very transparent with our data over the last 2.5 years of where we are at. and trying to really dig in deeper. I believe way back in March and through different communications with the board, I think this is an important step for our school district to engage an outside party to do the surveys, to look into our curriculum. Within that curriculum, do all of our students see themselves in our curriculum? To be able to make sure that we're having focus groups with students, with staff, and making sure we're surveying our community in these areas. And I know these are challenging topics now in this day and age. For me, what this is all about are our kids. What this is all about is making sure that we deliver on our promise to build a foundation of diversity, equity, inclusion from which each student emerges future ready. Part of that is being really honest with where we're at and partnering with organizations that will help us move the ball down the field for our students in a really positive way. So Laura, I will hand it to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm good with that. One more note, but that was like,
if you need to
I'm
go,
good.
keep going.
No, I'm good. I just looked at one more note, but it'll probably come up during some questions or something else.
Okay. Well, I have a couple of questions. That one of the questions that was raised in either an email or comment from the public, I don't remember exactly which, but there was discussion about the current workload of our staff. And I'm wondering about the expectation of staff participation in this audit, and how much of an extra burden, if any, are we going to be placing upon our staff, and to what level does that go district-wide?
I think the majority of the burden will be placed on the district office. One of the things internally we're working within our strategic plan are aspects called working plans, the work plans. So for DEI, I'm the owner. I'm the lead individual on this work, but I'll have contributors who will be from our learning and teaching. From the public comment tonight around focus groups and those will again be voluntary. If people don't want to participate, they would not have to participate. We will work through the logistics of the when, the where, the why with the company, if the board approves them, to make sure it has less impact on the day-to-day operation for our teachers and our students during the day. I would not want to pull students from their classrooms or teachers from their classrooms either, to conduct a focus group. Does that answer it, Laura?
Yeah, I think it does. And I think it also answers the next part of it, which I also heard asked of us in public comment and or emails. If the board was aware of the survey comments out of the DEI training, and I assume, I don't know what the bulk of those comments revealed, but if it was regarding workload, and is that why it pertained to this equity audit? Do you have
that? I don't know. I think I believe, again, based off of what the individual said, that there were some comments in our, and I'm forgetting the date, our staff training in October, where not everybody appreciated the equity training, the diversity training, part of the training around House bills, that we had to have the gender training, and because the vast majority of the training was around inclusionary practices, but there was an aspect around gender and gender identity. That is part of legislative House bill. Forgetting or Senate bill numbers that I think is like 5044 that we had to address. And we did discuss gender identity. We did discuss other aspects. So I don't see that correlation, quite honestly, between that and this. But I recognize in our society today that there are some words and different ideas that are troubling for some.
I guess my concern about that, sharing comments such as that, I think it may restrict people from being openly engaging in future trainings. If comments like that are made publicly, then from either side, people might be less willing to share with their building, with the district, with staff, if comments like that are being shared. That's just my takes on that.
And we do surveys after every district training. That's nothing new. That is just, and there are sometimes some people don't like our trainings. Let's just be honest. And then there are other ones where a lot of people like our trainings and they think they're one of the greatest things ever. But Sarah Wall, who's our director of professional development, does an outstanding job of making sure that we get feedback. Does everybody fill it out? No. But do we give access and opportunities for people to give us their feedback? Absolutely. But how it relates to this, Laura, I'm not 100% sure on that piece.
I'm just wondering if maybe the comments meant or were also meant to include the groups, the staff comments. You mentioned a survey related to the strategic plan. If maybe that might be what they were.
Oh,
a portion of what was being referred to. And or I believe if I read it right, in the introduction to the audit, it mentioned a group had met to discuss the audit. Maybe I'm making that up, but I thought there was a small committee type work that we haven't seen those comments or something, but regardless, I remember the survey. I remember you mentioning a survey of staff related to the strategic plan. Yeah. And I know we hadn't seen those, and maybe that could have been encompassed too, in addition to maybe the training. So
it could have been that.
One or both.
Yeah, it could have been one or both of those, Julie.
So I'm just going to go out on a limb and say I don't think we look at every comment available in every survey that the district has done over time. I think that's kind of getting in the weeds, and I think we have staff that review that to look for trends. So, but what I will say is, Paul, you gave a very a great synopsis of kind of where we've been, and this equity audit has been something we wanted to put on our plate for quite a while. So I'm quite pleased that we're getting this tonight, but also, a 267-page proposal. I couldn't get through that on Friday. I said, I'll send if I have more questions, but it's quite lengthy. And of course, it includes 2 examples of the products that they gave to 2 other districts. And, just as a reminder, for those of you who aren't aware, North Shore is generally a board of distinction in our state. Their superintendent won Washington Superintendent of the Year last year, and they are doing great things. And, I look at this equity audit as a way for us to be marrying up not just our accountability and equity, but also being very transparent, being vulnerable as a district to say, hey, these are some areas that we're probably not going to shine in. We're trying to, but we want to do better. We want to do better for all our students. And so I think to acknowledge, any shortcomings that are presented through the audit and our strive for continuous improvement are good things. And so I think it's time to get this audit done. Again, like you said, last spring, I think the audit was a big discussion item. And, and the other, I think, wonderful piece, although, people might look at the price tag and go, oh, that's really pricey. Well, we're using ESSER 3 funds for that, because that is a component that we can use that for. And I think that's wonderful. It's not something that we have to use levy dollars for, BEA dollars, but we can look at, okay, how has COVID maybe also exacerbated inequities in our district that already has some struggles with equity. So I think using those ESSER 3 funds is pretty much a no-brainer. So I'm quite pleased that we can target those ESSER 3 funds for this audit, and I'm excited that that the proposal that they sent could meet our deadlines of starting December 1st and ending by the end of June. So I think that's quite exciting, and I look forward to the board taking action on this.
And thank you for highlighting the payment through the CARES, the ESSER, because that was the piece that I forgot, but I knew it'd come up. So thank you for that.
Sure.
Other board members?
Yeah, I have quite a bit to say. Paul, we listened to your concept and thank you very much. I think there are a lot of different ways to do an equity program that are not the way I prefer, and I'm very open to them. I think I'm going to begin by saying that equity is board business. Yes, it's in the strategic plan, and yes, we've defined the wishes and the general objectives. That is a world away from looking at a detailed equity audit and how you're going to implement it successfully. I think it's very important that the board understands this. This might sound a little bit frivolous, but I'm going to say if I were to allow my biases to rule unchecked, I would have instantly supported this proposal based on one sentence in the introduction. Equity audits are never neutral. And that's the lesson we learn with equity. We're always bringing something to the table. I've spent, I don't know, somewhere between 6 and 10 hours since Friday going over this because I wanted to understand it, because it is board business and there are a lot of different ways to do it well. And I have a saying that sometimes it's not the choice that is important, it's how you implement it. There are often equal choices, and how you implement it is going to matter a lot. And I looked into consequential threads. And I didn't finish till 4 o'clock this afternoon. And I have more time than the rest of you because I don't have a job. The end result, without the benefit beforehand of your input, and I've got a little bit of input from you right now, is that I think the proposal is more likely than not to be a good one. But I would have preferred to go through a kind of workshop type preparation and do this in 2 steps so we do it better. What matters is not just a technically well done study, but the perception and reality of transparency and getting as much buy-in as we possibly can for the process as we can achieve. And that's much more likely when at all stages we get interested parties time and space to look at that. I have a couple of pages of questions and clarifications and thoughts. But as I say, basically, I think it's a sound proposal, but I don't feel that it's totally responsible just to take a snap when we're looking at it pretty close to blind, other than that was a good idea. And that's my input.
And the 2 pages of questions.
They're more than we could handle in a board meeting.
Oh, wow.
And I would like other people to have the time to think.
And I think I have then comments that kind of dovetail on Martin's thoughts on this. I very much appreciate that we're doing an audit before we're hiring a full-time FTE. I think I was one that was on board with that. And I completely understand this is very important work to the strategic plan itself. I'm very mindful of that. And I understand it's budgeted by CARES. So it almost seems like it's hooray, let's go. But the things that cause me a little bit of concern and maybe wanting to pull back is, Martin touched on this a little bit, I'm used to more of an RFP process where we talk about the needs a little bit in more detail. When you said equity audit last spring, yes, I think we were all on board. Looking at this 265-page proposal with a $169,000 price tag was not what I anticipated back in when we were first talking about it. So being able to work through some of the details to make sure that we're getting exactly what we need out of it and that we have resources available to implement it, to me is really important. So I realize it's critical, but our strategic plan also says that we're committed to this within the first 2 years. So since we sort of just inked the plan a week ago, I'm concerned of the need to run out the gates and do this. I'm a little bit concerned about how it might impact our already finite resources. You mentioned it's kind of voluntary for staff to participate, but we don't know where we're at right now with our learning recovery programs and what emphasis that is taking on staff to add something else to our focuses and our plates. I'd kind of like a little better understanding of priorities in that regard. I'm also worried about doing this audit during a period where our systems and operations may not be what they are on a more normal basis. I think, we're still in kind of a COVID model where we've got students attending primarily online. We've got exacerbated absences. We may not be running everything full steam. So I don't know what they use as data points in this. And I think those are things, that could be fleshed out a little bit to understand if this is, this spring when we're still recovering from COVID is the best time to do it versus a little bit later. We've heard our staff are on the razor's edge, and I'm worried about, exhausting resources and kind of pushing them over. A little worried about the signaling that this is another mandated thing that comes after this. So there's just, those were some of my questions in looking at this. And so it's more in the nature of timing. I understand need, and and I understand the importance to the plan, and I am supportive in that regard, but I'm just a little bit worried about the timing and whether this is the best use of our resources right now, versus maybe a little bit later when, like Martin mentioned, we can think through it a little bit more and have some more time to plan in some ways. That would be.
Yes, I'm a little confused how the timing is awkward, given that we're still in a pandemic. We don't know when we're going to be out of the pandemic. And also, equity is exacerbated during the pandemic. So I think it's actually a great time to be pursuing an equity audit, because equity has been magnified by the pandemic. So I'm not sure how timing is going to get better if you are looking for a normal school year. I think we knew in our normal school year, our equity was probably not so great. And I think it's probably not even, it's even worse, I think, during a pandemic. So I think the time is really to kind of get on it now. Again, this got brought up in the spring. Why do we need to delay it? And as far as the request for proposal, I think we need to kind of get out of the weeds. The staff can, pick what they think we need an equity audit on. If you look through the 267-page proposal, you saw 2 other school districts and the different questions that they had. And I think what our staff is asking in terms of how we're serving our students' needs in an equitable manner for academics and hiring staff that is representative of our student body. I mean, those are just 2 components, but I think those are huge in our district. So I think rather than micromanaging our RFP, our staff put this together. They assess the proposals that came in. This was the one they picked. We've got ESSER funds to cover it. I'm not really sure why people are balking. Our board value is equity. And I'm really disappointed to see that people are not embracing that right now, because this is an opportune time for us to be doing it. So I'm just saying, let's put the ESSER money where our mouth is and go for the equity audit. The RFP has been evaluated by our staff. They've had submitted their ideas for what they want. They've received an adequate proposal. I'm not sure why some people are expressing hesitancy when we have a board value of equity. So,
Well,
And I'm not debating the board value of equity, nor am I suggesting that I'm in any way think this is a bad approach to take at some point. My concern is, I think Martin raised it well, this is a board decision, how we implement this. I think, I don't know what staff think about this. I know our administrators put together a proposal that maybe is reasonable. I've never seen one of these before. And so when I look at it now, 264 pages, it was very much different than what I expected. And I am concerned about what audits bring out, because audits identify issues. And if we're not ready, if we're not able to tackle the issues when we identify them, then we may expose ourselves to legal liability. So I don't know if our attorneys are comfortable even with us putting out something that is going to expose us. I think I agree. You know, I mean, I'm getting off on a
yeah,
little bit
because
there, but
I don't think turning our heads around or putting our heads in the sand is the answer either.
no, I agree, and that's not what
Looking at the proposal, and you know what will be evaluated: curriculum, policies, materials, and resources, discipline policies, instructional policies, hiring and recruitment strategies, access to grade level instruction, access to advanced placement and honors curriculum. I honestly don't feel like our school system needs to be 100% in-person learning going, you know, full bore in order for those things to be evaluated. In a way, it's better if we're a little bit on pause when we have a team of people coming in to evaluate those things. So I am not so much concerned after Paul's comment regarding the staff resources related to this proposal. I'm not so concerned about that, but I am wondering about, we've been talking about this for a long time, you know, and we can put it off forever and ever and ever and ever, and we can never do it. And I'll be ashamed of us if we never do it. But I do want to know, why is the timeline important? I think I know why the timeline is important, the December 1 to June 30th, 2022. But can you speak to that, please, Paul?
Yeah, great question. Really, to a number of the issues that Julie and Martin brought up, that we're giving them time on the ground to do all of the evaluation of the aspects that you just talked about, Laura, to be able to bring back to the board and the community a full report for us then to start to build within our strategic plan the aspect of how we're going to tackle this, because it will not be just a one thing. It will be like in our strategic plan. It will have to be phased in, leveled out, because we're not going to be able to do everything in one moment. But it gives us a time to be able to see from that early June period through the summer how we would phase it out or how we would phase it in, and then trying to get a group of educators, staff members to become part of an equity team that would help us think through the whole phasing. So it would not be August, I'm going to say 26. I don't know if that's our first day of next year, but on August 26th, you're going to see transformational things occurring. What you will see is a team starting to come together, a team diving deep back into their recommendations, and then a team helping us to decide what is that phased approach to what I would assume would be a multi-step approach. So the time between December and June is for them to be on the ground, to be talking, to be evaluating all of those pieces. It's them going into the curriculum and looking at this work. Do we have representation in our curriculum across K-12, across all content areas? So a lot of this work is on them. I will be the contact. Obviously, learning teaching will have an aspect. Will there be some time where their team is speaking with our teachers and speaking with our administrators? Yes. But will anybody be implementing anything from that plan between now and June 30th? No. And quite honestly, it will be even later than that, I believe, once we have that equity team in place for the district to really talk about it and lay it out. And the board, I would propose that the board have a member on that team so that they are part of this, to Martin's point. Laura, thank you for that question.
Can I throw in a few things? I want to dispute friendlily, Michelle, your characterization of what I'm saying. I am saying that precisely because this is so important, it has to be done well, okay? The next thing, and quickly, it wasn't really on my agenda, but I think a board involvement in the process would address my concern that this is board business, because I think this is not something that we delegate to the administration. This is something that I feel personally we're accountable for in ways. I am very ready to accelerate the process. And maybe, Laura, I can reduce my few questions since some of you answered them already, and we can prolong tonight a little bit. But I do want to have one question. Well, I'm going to make one comment first. The easy part is getting the data and stats. And that can be done without disrupting everybody very much. And that's really valuable, but that's technical. When I read the Evergreen recommendations, I thought they were a little light and generic. I would like to have seen something with a bit more specificity in it. And if you go back to the 2016 North Shore one, which is a little bit older and it was a little bit more focused, the word I threw in there was dilemmas. It recognized the necessity to involve the community. Well, I think all of us have advanced since 2016 in realizing the critical nature of equity and picking up on what Michelle said, how much it's hurt in the last 18 months. I mean, equity, I'll get into that too. But there they talked about dilemmas. And I think that's part of it. That's why I said we've got to have buy-in. Now, I'm going to pause for a moment. One is the human burden on our staff. That's not going to hurt so much with the data, but it is going to hurt on focus groups and ideas. And the other one is, how do we select stakeholders for focus groups? Those are both things that in a workshop, I would like to get a level of comfort that we were not pushing our idea people, because it's not just the data. The consultants can do that. The consultants who are very highly qualified, but actually they all came out of their PhDs pretty recently. You know, to actually develop a little bit more.
Martin, if I could just jump on that piece.
Yeah.
The thinking there is, I think it's important to select a company first.
Yeah.
And then have that next work with the board to define all those pieces even further. What does that look like? But I think to do that most companies wouldn't spend that amount of time doing that if they weren't selected. But I'd absolutely would set up, you know, if it's tonight, if it's whenever, that I would set up the time with the board to make sure they're sitting with the two leads to be able to talk through those pieces.
Yeah, that's for us to get our act in order, not them.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree. And you know, I just wanted to say something else to reinforce this, and I'm just going to hold this up. This is a 2019, well, you can't read it probably, OECD report on social mobility. We are, and just by coincidence, while I was having a snack this evening before the board meeting, I picked up an article on precisely that. So a briefing on social mobility in America, and it stated that we are less socially mobile than Canada and the EU. And in that table that I just showed you from the organization of OECD, the rich countries of the world, we are, the average OECD is 4.5 years for changing social mobility. We take 5. You know, good countries take 3. Germany and France are worse than us. They take 6. But we are not heroes. This is really, really important. But I think what I'm stressing is we've got to do it. I think it's very important to have a third party look at it, not just ourselves. I didn't say that before, and that's a characteristic there. The reinsurances that I would look at is manage the burden on our staff. This is my critical question. Do we have to finish by June 22 for using CARES funds?
No, I believe
I don't
it's,
think so.
no, I can't remember, but I believe we have 2 years beyond that. I think we have, and Jeanette, if you're listening, remind me the last, when we have to finish up the CARES dollars or have them expensed.
So 2023, but then we have 1 year of carryover. So technically
June 20, because when I look at that timetable, that was another red flag to me. So these were my red flags. Overburdening our educators and staff and anybody who's involved in providing ideas and input to manage it. We can talk to the consultants about that. I think I'm fairly satisfied we chose good consultants. I haven't heard any, I reached that conclusion by myself. Selecting the stakeholders, I think that's really important between us and the community as well. And that's the buy-in. And that's what North Shore called their dilemmas and blindness in their report as they identified factors. So we see it in the reports. And so I think that we would need to manage the implementation with a lot more in it than is in the proposal, which is fine and logical. So then I will then shut up, because I think we could move forward if I had real promises that we were going to do it right and that would resolve my concerns.
Yeah, the pieces that you mentioned tonight, those are all aspects that I see as very doable by bringing together. Again, if the board selects to do this tonight and takes the action, then bringing the Education Northwest out for a workshop with the board to talk through those different components that you just mentioned, Martin. So they're very well aware of the concerns. How do we select? What's the best way to select individuals to participate? All of those aspects. And like you said, working with the experts who've done this type of work before.
I monopolized the podium. There are 4 more board members.
And I just have one more comment, because I think that's where I'm struggling with this particular proposal at this stage right now. And timing could be we start in January and still get it done. I'm not sure what I expect in terms of timing. I know our strategic plan said we've got 2 years to get this done. But having those elements that Martin spoke about decided sort of in advance in the proposal that we're deciding, that's kind of what I'm looking for. Because right now, if we were to approve this, we're going back to them and saying, well, you didn't put this in your proposal, but can we get together and meet and talk further? Does that mean their price goes up? Those are the kind of, the promises that I would have liked to seen solicited from them so they would come back and tell us that, yes, this is part of our process. This is who we're going to engage. This is what we're going to do. And that's why my struggle with timing is that I don't know that this proposal incorporates everything we want to see at a board level in terms of the process going out. And I echo the concerns on staff where, yeah, the data is one thing, but the staff involvement is potentially quite another. And if we're short subs, short in every position, is this the right time? So I would appreciate a little bit more feedback from our staff who might be impacted with the information gathering to confirm this is the path to go down. But that's it for me. Well,
the document has been on the website since last week, so folks could check it out. I think the audit is one thing, the actual implementation of the ideas is another, right? So we're just talking about getting the audit done, guys. And I don't think they're going to be trying to take our staff away from teaching time. I mean, they, everybody knows that surveys and interviews, people are going to volunteer for that who want to do that, right? And I think we'll have enough people who care about equity in our district who are going to volunteer to be involved in that. And from what I read, I don't think the time commitment will be onerous. So I would love to hear from Maria, because Maria's been very quiet and you're part of this board, Maria. So please chime in.
Thank you. Yeah, this is something that just hearing this conversation is actually, the timing piece. This is actually really frustrating for me to hear, because I'm asking my colleagues to please consider this audit as if it's your son or your daughter being impacted directly. There's never going to be a right time to push this off and say the timing is not right. I'm sorry, but equity, there's never going to be a proper timing to bring in equity into our school district, and look at it from a lens from that parent or that student that has been underrepresented in our district for so long. And so as a parent of a student of color, as a person of color, this is really challenging for me to hear this, that, there could be better timing to address these inequities that have been happening for way too long in our district. This is not about race, if this is the concern. This is about underrepresented students. Let's think about our students with disability, our students on 504 plans, our LGBTQ plus students, low income, homeless students. What are we currently doing right now that's working to put them in a better place academically? We have stuff in place, but are we digging deep enough to really address those inequities and do what we have agreed to do as a board as one of our values? Like I said, what we're doing isn't 100% working for all of our students. Let's look at the data. I hate to go over this data because it's accessible to anybody, but when I look at our dropout rate, our English language learners, our dropout percentage is almost 17%, when compared to our non-ELL learners is 6%. Our low-income students, 11.5% compared to non-low-income students at 3%. I can go on and on. Let's look at our discipline. Discipline is one of the things that we're going to be looking at. Why are homeless students being disciplined at a 3.1% when our non-homeless students at a 1%? Students with disability, 3.3% with the 1 point. I mean, like I said, I can keep going on this data. If you look at our Caucasian and our white students meeting the ELA standards, 71.2% of our students are meeting it, when our Hispanic and our Black students are meeting it at 38%. That's less than half of our counterparts meeting it. And this is so troubling for me when I hear that we need to wait and really, like I said, look at it from a lens of a student or a parent of one of these students. We owe it to all of our students to do this. We owe it to our district. We owe it to our community. We say we value the diversity as one of our board values. And like our students said in the strategic plan committees, we need to stop pretending, because, if we really need to take action, if we say that we need to show that action and really say, hey, all of our students matter. And we're going to uncover the ugliness of what our district, of what we're dealing with. We can't sweep it under the rug any longer. Like I said, it's an investment for all of our students and an investment for our district. And once we identify those areas and really start addressing the needs, everyone in our district, in our community will benefit. So, I'm very passionate about this. Again, I bring the unique perspective of seeing it from a different lens, from a different perspective. And
$169,000 is a lot of money, but it's, to me, it's a small investment for all of our students. So I don't know. After all that, I don't want to cut anybody else's discussion short, but I would like to actually make a motion to, for the school board to consider approving the recommendation of having National Northwest conduct the equity audit for the cost of $169,436.
Okay. There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Michelle. So further discussion, anybody? I have something, but I'll defer to the rest of you first.
I was actually going to suggest that maybe we, if we're looking at a December 1st start time, maybe we table it for a week, let them come back with a proposal that encompasses some of the elements that, Martin suggested regarding ensuring that we're going to have teams collaborate on this and whatnot, incorporating a little bit more of that information to have more assurance. That would be my thought. And then it's ready for end of November, assuming approved, then you could still meet a December timeframe.
And just to be clear, the equity team is not run by that group. That is within the strategic plan, the equity district team, that is our team, that we work from it based off of the findings of the organization. So I just want to be clear that the team, the staff burden would be surveys, would be a focus group, would be potentially sometime looking at the material, but the equity team itself is a district team that is not dependent upon this group moving it forward. That team is taking the recommendations from this findings and then moving those forward. I just want to be clear what the two things are.
And also I want to say that what we're looking at right here now today is their response to our RFP. This is not a contract, correct? So I would assume that you as superintendent would have the latitude to negotiate some of those deliverables, prior to bringing the contract back to the board for final approval. I assume that the contract has to come back at a future board meeting. Is that correct?
This is that contract. This is the
contract.
Yeah, but there is, when I spoke to them, when I told them that this was the group that the administration is recommending, that I would speak to them tomorrow and making sure that if there is any necessary adjustments from there. But what I heard tonight was the one adjustment would be a meeting with the board to have those workshops. That was the additional takeaway. What was an additional time with the board to further understand the work.
Okay, so I want to say, sorry, one more thing in response to everybody's comments, really. So for far too long, and I want to bring up again that I have served for 18 years on this board, but one of my main sources of frustration has been related to the amount of time it takes to implement things in our district. And so that by the time we have implemented a curriculum or an initiative, the 4 or 5 or 6 year implementation plan, by the time we get to the end of that, we've basically forgotten the reason that we started in the first place. And it's been extremely difficult to track progress or to make improvements. And in spite of everybody's best intentions over the years, we have not significantly moved the needle on student achievement. And that is not acceptable to me. And this study, we talk, one of my passions is kindergarten readiness. And kindergarten readiness impacts students of color and students of low socioeconomic status. I think that this audit is going to confirm that early learning is essentially important to those groups in particular. It's going to identify some other things that we aren't aware of and that we have to work on. But if we want to be a world-class district, which at some point in time, some of us have said we want to be award-winning school district. We want to be the kind of school district where our statistics blow people out of the water, that we've got really high percentages of achievement in every grade level, in every subject area for all ethnicities and other elements of diversity. And if we want that to happen, I think that implementing or enacting this equity audit is the first critical step in making that happen. I don't think delaying it to tweak it, if Paul can tweak it with the team, delaying is not going to get us further down the road. The only thing that's going to get us further down this road towards a world-class school district and high achieving students is taking action on this plan today.
And Laura, thankfully I have my trusted colleague Jeanette, and you were correct. The contract will come forward. We're approving this company. Thank you for asking the question. Yeah, so we'll have the contract itself with, and I'll work with them to make sure we have that language within it. So thank you, Laura, for doing that, and Jeanette for correcting me.
Yep, thank you,
Thank
Jeanette.
Okay, I still want to say two things. I do want to stress that doing it right is because it is so important. And I totally agree that we should work really, really hard to accelerate it. But that means we have to recognize, and secondly, I would trust the district and the superintendent to take care of the concerns that I've raised. But I want to quote Michelle on one thing. People who want will volunteer. This is the poison pill for a lot of projects, that you don't get everybody, the passive, the opposed, and the enthusiasts also having buy-in. And I think that is so important in this unfortunately frequently misinterpreted initiative. It's really, really crucial, but we have to combat the misinterpretation as well. So it really needs to be, if you have focus groups, we really need to make sure, and that can be done after acceptance. It's just that that wasn't evident beforehand and we haven't listened to each other.
I completely agree with that. We need to have the detractors actively involved in the process as well as the supporters.
And that's a good focus group.
And I think people who are energized on both sides, whether they want equity or they don't want equity, they're going to come forward to be part of that. It's not just going to be the equity folks.
And the consultants recognize that in their North Shore report in subtle words.
Yeah. Okay, so that was a lot of discussion. There is a motion on the floor. Is there any further discussion? Okay, this will be a roll call vote. Martin.
Aye.
Julie.
Nay.
Michelle.
Aye.
Maria.
Aye.
Laura is aye. That motion passes. Thank you for that robust discussion. So now I believe that concludes the business on our agenda tonight. So we move into board communication. Are there any board members that have communication they wish to share with the rest of us? Yes, Michelle.
Yes, I have some parting thoughts. Tonight is my last official school board meeting. So I just want to throw out some brief comments and recognitions. So I just want to let you all know it has been an honor to serve as a school board member for the past 4 years. It has taken a lot of hours, a lot of work, but I have truly enjoyed being a representative to this board and have learned so much, not just about our district, but about school districts across our state. I've learned more about equity, and I've learned more about student voice, and I hope we continue to see more on that area with the board in the future. Our board, our district, we've been moving forward for some time, and I'm really proud of our board for moving forward with this equity audit tonight. I know that it has been our board value for a couple of boards now, and I'm just asking that you remember to uphold this value in all of the work that you do in the future. You know, our district is on this course for greater success for all our students, and, you know, the board has a lot to be proud of. I wish that the board has continued growth and success as the pandemic continues and eventually ends. I know it will end eventually. I hope the board can, you know, continue to be respectful in communication and get rid of things like rolling eyes and talking under people's breath while they're muted on Zoom. Probably go back to in-person meetings soon. So maybe that won't be an issue. I did want to address, because came off of a busy campaign season with two others of you, and there were some public comments tonight about a vaccine mandate. So I just want to clarify, if Paul wasn't already going to do this, but you know, vaccine mandates for students are not determined by our school districts in our state. They are determined by the Washington State Board of Health. And for anyone who wants to Google that, feel free to do that. That's what I did months ago. In addition, the mask mandates, which we're all pretty familiar with, before Governor Inslee's current indoor mask mandate, OSPI had mandated it for students and staff for this year. So I just want to remind people, it's not the school board's decision on those mandates. We have higher authorities that are telling us what needs to be done to keep people safe. Finally, I want to address the term CRT, or critical race theory, that has been all over the news, as we all know. And for some of you who don't know, it's a law school offering. It's a law school class offering, not offered in every law school. It is not a K-12 curriculum in our state or other states, although some states have banned it. And our school district back in July put out a press release that we don't teach CRT because there is no K-12 curriculum. So I hope that's helpful. In addition, social emotional learning, or SEL, is not part of CRT. I had people asking me that this summer. So those are just some helpful thoughts, hopefully, for those of you who don't know about mask and vaccine mandates and how they apply to our students and those who are in our buildings, and CRT, because it's still on the radar. But I certainly hope that our district and our board can continue to move forward for our students with equity as one of those guiding principles that we're all behind. So thank you all for being colleagues of mine, and thank you for allowing me to serve. It was an honor, and I wish you all well.
Thank you, Michelle. I mean, we all know that being on the school board is not all fun and games, and it can be difficult at times, and you certainly rode a difficult wave in the last 4 years, and I appreciate your service. So thank you very much for stepping up to serve on this Wenatchee School Board.
Thank you, Laura.
Any other board comments tonight?
I would just say in regards to Michelle, I worked with a large number of board members over my time now. There are very few who put in the time and effort that you did. Your attention to detail was unmatched. Your details around the questions that you would ask. We always ask that our board members, send questions, and you're always there asking questions, clarifying questions, just different ways for you to understand the packet at a deeper level. So you were ready there for our Tuesday nights. But your attention, the work on our policy committee you've done that twice now. Again, attention to detail, your understanding and your willingness to want to push for more voices in those policies was instrumental. When I think about the dress code policy and the powerful opportunity to sit with students and listen to their why, you pushed that, Michelle. You were adamant that we made sure that was something that made that policy come to life. And it really helped all the other board members understand where our students were at. So I'm with Laura. Thank you for the 4 years. This last year and a half, 2 years, I wouldn't wish that on any board member. I mean, it has been some of the most challenging times and making really hard decisions. And everybody on this board. This board should be very proud of that. I mean, never in the history have board members been asked to vote on things that were presented to them in this time. And each of you stood up for those challenges. But Michelle, thank you. Thank you for always showing up. Thank you for being present. Thank you for advocating for our students and our staff and our community. I appreciate your service. So thank you. And good luck on having time back in your life.
Yes, I might have just a bit more free time, I think. So just one note on legislative reps, since I was the ledge rep this year, and since it was all online, just to let you know, whoever is going to be taking that over, there are weekly meetings, which are really great, that give you an idea of how the bills are moving, and you also get to hear from other districts in terms of like ESSER funds and different things. Of course, we're in a little bit different place now than we were a year ago, but super helpful weekly meetings for the legislative reps. So I hope whoever is willing to take that on, I would be glad to meet with them and tell them some of the things that I learned, because it was a very unusual year, I think, to be a ledge rep. But I wish you all good luck and continue moving our district forward with Paul as the superintendent. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michelle.
Michelle, my words. Thank you for the dedication and diligence you put into your school director job. During the last 2 years, I have really valued and greatly benefited from your contribution to giving us to be one of the 5 board members, giving us a varied and independently different input so that we can behave appropriately. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Wish you well.
Thank you.
Everybody has summarized it pretty well. It's been an honor and learn. Working on the policy committee has been a great experience for me to just jump in and learn a little bit more about the service that we are here to do. Please don't be a stranger. I think, as a parent, a district parent, a community member, you're still pretty well invested. So, let's continue. Please continue your work, as outside of the board, advocating for all of our students. Thank you for everything.
I will continue to advocate for this district and its students and our board. So thank you, Maria.
I also just wanted to say thank you for your service to our board and to the community. And I know we are often on different sides of several issues, but I think healthy differences of opinion make for productive decisions and well thought out board decisions. So I appreciate the perspective that brings, and enjoyed tough conversations. So I hope you stay involved and good luck in the future.
Thank you, Julie.
Okay, so I wanted to move along to talk about in-person board meetings. We did say that after the elections, we would be considering to return to in-person board meetings. Our next meeting we have, our next meeting is the 23rd, but we have a reband, what do we have on Monday, Paul? Is
A
it
workshop. We have a board workshop from 1 to 2:30.
1 to 2:30, okay. And so I would like to propose that we for sure go to in-person meetings at our November 23rd meeting. We will be having swearing in of our re-elected and new board members at that meeting. But doing the workshop remotely, is that what you're thinking, Paul?
We're open to having it in person. For this, it may work better if it's in person, quite honestly. But that's up to the board.
Okay. I'm up for
happy to be
in-person.
in person for the workshop. And then
In-person.
with respect to the 23rd, that's the day the county certifies the election. So I think
Right.
that will happen in the afternoon. So that sounds fine.
Hopefully before 6 o'clock. Yeah. So, and I did also want to say that be prepared, board members, because that is our reorg board meeting where our president and vice president positions, our ledge rep position, and I don't know if we'll do the committee assignment at that meeting too, but we will have a vacancy on the policy committee. So be thinking about that.
And it will be, other than the pieces that Laura just mentioned, it will be a very light agenda because it's more ceremonial. We'll pay the bills and do those pieces, but then do the ceremonial and then exactly what Laura said, the president, the vice president, those pieces. But as far as kind of the overall content, it will be much lighter and much.
And just to be clear, I will not accept a nomination for a third term as president. So let's be clear about that.
And then just in preparation for the meeting on the 23rd, obviously we are following through with previous discussions about the masking requirements because it is a ceremonial. I'm expecting our meeting. I'm expecting we're probably expecting more than just your average board meeting attendance. And so everything that was discussed, what, month ago, is applicable for the upcoming in-person meeting, correct?
Correct. Yeah, masks are required. And I would hate to move that meeting online. So, because it's a special moment for board members, for Catherine coming on as a new board member. Those are important days. And as well for Julie and Maria, who worked really hard throughout their campaign. So yeah, the mask mandate will be in effect, and everyone will be required to be wearing the mask during the meeting inside our building. So.
Okay, and we will have masks available for those who might have forgotten them. And we'll also have folks outside the door giving a friendly reminder. All right, superintendent's report.
Just a couple pieces. Just want to be clear. Ms. Petro said, we put out a press release on that CRT. We did not. That was just, it was posted on our website and the media picked it up. So there was no other communication from us on that. With the training, we actually put it in two different places. We put it in our board summary and we put it in our WSD weekly. So I feel like we did a really nice job of communicating out that information. The other questions, board members, and through our conversations, I feel like we've answered those. I got to read you something. So this doesn't happen very often. I won't read the individual's name, but I received this a few days ago. Several weeks ago, while walking my dog in the morning, I collapsed on the sidewalk across the street from my house. At that moment, 3 of your buses were paused at the stop sign there. The bus drivers immediately came to my rescue, took our dog back to our house, called our ambulance, and stayed with me until EMTs could get there. Then they explained to the EMT what they had observed. I ended up spending the night in the hospital, but I'm fine now. My heart was touched by these heroes who gave me such comfort and support. I just wanted to thank them again and for hiring such a great staff.
Mhm.
Just a recognition that our staff continue to go above and beyond, continue to do the right things, even in really challenging circumstances. So we'll be reaching out to the 3 bus drivers and presenting them with something very special. But I wanted to just one more highlight of what our staff do to support our community members, and for this individual to make sure, she wanted to make sure that I knew about it and celebrated our staff. So I feel like a good way to finish this portion of the meeting.
Very nice. Okay, well, with that, the school board will now recess into a closed meeting for a period of 20 minutes to discuss collective bargaining sessions with employee organizations, including contract negotiations and discussions related to the interpretation or application of a labor agreement, or when the board is planning or adopting the strategy or position to be taken during the course of collective bargaining, professional negotiations, or mediation proceedings, or reviewing the proposals made in the negotiations or proceedings while in progress. Pursuant to District Policy 1410 and RCW 42.30.140, this discussion is exempt from the Open Public Meetings Act and will be closed to the public. The board is not expected to take final action following the closed meeting. So thank you, everybody. And somebody,
Board, if we take a 5-minute.
we can take a 5-minute break, and then somebody can do whatever's necessary to shut down the public stream.